So it is awesome to have you back another Sunday night together chatting. And last week I had the great privilege of just hanging out with the two newbies and hearing some of the things that they were doing. Was really refreshing to let them kind of take the lead. And as I closed last week and start this week, just wanted to thank all of you for always keeping us focused on where we started and what our purpose is to support all educators, but really with a focus on some of our new educators. And what I did is I actually asked some from my district this week and have a couple questions. And of course, Emily, jump in if you had something. But one of the things that she brought up, and I gave a very principal lens to her questions. So I want to also bring in some of your thoughts. So one of the things that she talked about was how to improve some of the school, and you can jump in, Emily, but some of the kids were name calling or the classroom management thing. So Emily, what was the specifics from last week? Because I want to get Ariel, who teaches a close grade to you, and then Carrie, who works with a lot of students who are often seen as the one causing some of these classroom issues.
Yeah, so I was just looking for some suggestions like in general, because we were having some classroom management problems in different scenarios. So in my in-person classroom, there were just there was a lot of name calling, and students just being truly mean to one another and wishing some students were in the classroom because of those who were acting out and taking things away from the other students because it took so long to get through things. Which ended up causing me to not be able to do guided reading for a long time, just because we had to go back to the basics, and there just wasn't enough time, because dealing with all of those behaviors just took up so much of my hour that I have with these kids, because I don't have very long with them. And so that was one thing that I was looking for some advice on, just being able to kind of manage those and talking about the things that I have tried already and things like that. And then remotely, I was brainstorming with Molly some ways to get some more activity and some more participation from some of my other students. And she came up with this, she started and found this on some sort of social media, maybe TikTok or Twitter or something, this whole class Among Us game for participation that I introduced to my kiddos on Friday, and we're going to start tomorrow. So they were really excited about it, and I think that this will help those kiddos. But my in-person ones are definitely a struggle, and there are a lot of there's a lot of butting heads in my classroom with a lot of strong personalities, and we have systems in place, and we are trying some new things coming up on Monday. But the more ideas, the better, because my students tend to get kind of sick of the marble jar, the tickets, the wheel going on a walk break. If you all finish this, we can go do this as a class activity. It works for a week or so, and then it kind of dies out a bit. And we've been struggling a little, but.
So poor yeah. Emily and Molly had the principal lens. They came into the principal's office with this, and I'm just here's the things you should try. So now that I have you back in, and for those who were here last week, this might be a second time you hear it, but I want to get different perspective, because it came from a 11-year principal, 5-year district leader. Here's what you should do, very formulaic. And I love to get from those of you who are in the field as well. And Lisa, before we do that, Lisa has her hand up. So I think that may either mean to throw a question in the chat, Lisa, or an answer, or if you want to come over and answer, we're happy to do that. Just let me know. And Miguel, I saw you put something in the question and answer, which is awesome, but we don't really check that often. That's more of behind the scenes. If you have a question, throw it in the chat. That'd be awesome. And if Lisa, you're raising your hand because you want to come over and contribute to this, just let me know and I'll bring you over as well. So Ariel and Carrie, take it away.
So, hey, Emily, how are you?
Hi, good, how are you?
So one more thing, totally interrupting again. Miguel asked us to throw our Twitter handles in the chat.
For sure.
So Emily, I've been where you are in all different stages of my career. And first of all, I just want to empathize with you, because it's really hard and it's really heartbreaking sometimes when you know that your students know better or they don't know better. And then you're playing this in the middle where you want to support everyone. And we have to treat all of our students equally, whether someone that they're bullying or that they're hurting someone. And I know how hard it can be. Something I've done this year in particular, now that I'm working with younger students, is really spending individual time with each student and getting to know them and what's getting them going? What is getting certain students feeling upset, or what is making a certain student act that way? Not saying that it's right or wrong, but working with those students to really get to the root of what's going on with them, because a lot of the time they can't control it. I know for my students in the past that they don't know why they're acting that way. And sometimes
Yeah.
they just need an adult to say to them, that was very hurtful. What do you want to share, or what's going on? Because they're growing and developing too. And I realized in the past that sometimes my students felt like they didn't have a voice in my classroom, or if they just didn't have the chance to share. So they would be acting out because it's their way of being part of the group, and they were able to then like get some attention on them. So this year I've made a conscious effort of trying to be with every single student individually at some point during either the day or the next day if I can. I take a lot of my students outside for mask breaks alone, or in small groups, like 2 students or 3 students. And sometimes I'll just talk to them like, what's going on? How are you feeling? And, you said this to this student. Can you tell me what you mean by that? And having that really private alone time for me has been so helpful this year. I've never really had that before because I've never really worked in a group. I've never been an elementary school teacher, so I've never really had so much time alone with students. I know it's hard though, because I have a co-teacher. So I don't know if you can, like, take a kid for a walk. Do you
So
have that ability?
I do have that capability all the time. And so the main problem with that for me is I teach just this one classroom. Like I don't have morning meeting with them or anything. Like I just have my hour and 20-minute block because I do like have 2 different classrooms.
Mhm.
But we did this with one student who was having a really tough time in the beginning of the year. Every morning I start my Zoom a little bit like later, and I had my TA like start the morning meeting with those kiddos. And I took this student on a walk around the school and we just got to talk. And it made a big difference for this one kid. It definitely did. Just time is tough. And I feel like every
No.
single one of them needs that from me. And but I was actually just thinking of with another student who's been having a really hard time trying that morning meeting walk with them too. And so I think that could make a difference because I agree. There's so much on their chests and there's just not enough time. Like I come in ready to teach them readings. I only have so much time, but they're not ready to hear that from me. And it's kind of a balance, like how much time should I spend on my lesson and like getting them to get this work done so we don't fall behind, and how much time can I spend with them? And as a first year teacher, it's like stressful because I want to make sure they're academically succeeding, but also not like breaking down and bullying and doing all of these behaviors because they're
And I
not
think what
comfortable.
you're doing is great, because there's so many times that you need to just put your academics on hold, get that relationship and management back together. And it's okay if you need to pause guided reading for a little bit so you can make sure every student feels safe and supported. That's what you need to do. I took a student out for a mask break the other day, just completely missed the read aloud. And I like students to be there for the read aloud every day. I really value the power of literacy, but he just it wasn't working for him. We threw a ball around in the back for a little bit. He was so happy that we were playing catch, sanitized hands, of course. And it made the difference for him. He just
Yeah.
needed that one-on-one time to just be like, hey, I'm feeling this way. And I'm like, great, let's talk about it. And then we went in and it was like a completely different kid. So if you have the availability, I know it's a very simple answer, easier said than done.
That's a good suggestion.
No, but it's very practical. Like, I
Yeah.
think that's important.
Like
And
anybody can just, take a kid for a walk, but not everybody can really connect with a student. And I know obviously you can, because you said it, it worked so well for you that time that you did that.
Right. And that's a good suggestion too, because sometimes our like school counselor or someone will come and like take those students on a walk, but it should probably be me instead. And they can hang with those kids and finish up the activity so that I can get to know them too. I think that would be a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Definitely a balance though, too, because you also, we want to be conscious of the kids that are speaking up and showing us how they're feeling, but we have to be conscious of all the students in our classroom, even the ones that aren't, right?
Right.
And so I think you're super wise to be aware of the situation that's happening in your classroom. And I think Ariel is right too. Like if our kids aren't emotionally available or attentively available to learn, then we're never going to get to the reading part, right?
Right.
And so it's smart to be aware of that situation. And like Ariel is saying too, it's good to give yourself grace. If our kids aren't available to learn either emotionally or regulation wise, they're never going to get to the reading part. So that urge to give them time for those kinds of that urge to give them time for that is the right urge, because if you aren't meeting students' needs at an emotional level or a regulation level or a feeling safe level, they're never going to be available to read with you or feel like that safetiness in there.
Right.
What I was thinking is I love that you're taking the individual students in there out for walks. I also want to remember all the students in your classroom too. And it makes me wonder like how you could replicate that feeling that you give each of those kids. Like when you talked, you like glowed about the relationship and the impact that had on students. And it makes me wonder like how you can replicate that with all the students, like maybe every Monday or the first 2 or 3 minutes of every class is a morning walk. And it's in their journal, and then they turn it into you, and you just, you flip through and write some quick, like at the end of the week, you write something back to them, but something that would give you that same feel that you have with those students you've taken out, but allow you to kind of maybe give it to everybody in the classroom,
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I do also feel that I'm not giving some of those students who do have fabulous behaviors and are really focusing and trying that same attention. And they notice it too, saying like, I'm frustrated, or like, you didn't come to me like at all during the lesson today because I was so busy like putting out fires throughout the classroom. And that is like, that's good, like a journal or something like that, to get talking with those students too, with everyone. Because I feel like it's just like, there's only 11 kids in there, and I don't know how it's possible that I'm spread so thin between all of them, but
Yeah, no, those are both.
I get it.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So
even
I want to welcome Lisa in. Lisa, can you tell us a little bit of who you are, what your role is in education? Do you know someone up here?
Yeah, no, hi.
Hey.
I'm Lisa. I'm from just outside Toronto. I'm north. No,
Awesome.
I just came across you on Twitter, and we've been dialoguing for the last couple months, and this has been a really great space to spread positivity. And it's great. So I thought I'd jump in. I saw the email and I was like, why not? So
Awesome.
yeah, I just wanted to, my background is, well, I have a master's in special education and early years from U of T. I have my degree in early childhood development along with my early childhood education diploma. I have a number of AQs as a specialist in special education. I'm doing an AQ right now in my autism qualifications as well. So I came from a contained room and I got redeployed with COVID and this mess. I was teaching virtual grade 5. Now I'm doing an SK1 hybrid nonsense.
Awesome.
So primary is my jam.
I saw you raise your hand. So did you have something for Emily, or a question, or jump in? No.
Yeah, for sure.
Before you do that, you said you had a degree and you rattled off 3 letters. You also said you were from Canada. We may not know what those 3 letters mean. What was that? The university of the 3 letters?
Oh, University of Toronto.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, absolutely. I think everyone has kind of hit the point. You're not going to get to your reading until you've established relationships and understand their emotional levels at this point. And all behavior is communication. So understanding what those behaviors are trying to communicate. You could even, if you have the resources in your district of a behavior analyst, you can take a look at an ABC chart to take a look at the antecedents. If you're finding that they are disruptive to a point where it could be become physical or violence. Again, coming from a contained classroom, that's kind of where my head goes. But in a neurotypical classroom, you're going to see just kind of annoying behaviors, right? So absolutely, body breaks. I always start my day with a dance. We do a lot of dancing, 2 to 3 minutes to kind of set the tone. And I actually do a body break in between my different subjects. So that way it's a physical break. It's that transitional piece. And we know that students definitely struggle in a transitional piece. So if you're coming in for your reading time, your guided reading at that time, and there is a teacher before or after, you are a transition. So having kind of a transitional piece, whether it be a journal, as Carrie had mentioned, which was so beautiful because it ties so beautifully into guided reading, guided writing, and then adding a class walk. I mean, what a great way to bring out some of that natural everyday language. So I think that those strategies to kind of start your class with, then you can kind of get into the middle of it. And then I would end off in a similar notion, some sort of body break, some sort of breathing activity, because that's where you need to meet your learners. I also do a check-in to see if they've had breakfast, if they've had lunch, if they've had snacks, things like that, because if their tummy's rumbling, it doesn't matter how wonderful your strategies are or how much we've spent on digital documents, they're not going to open it because they're starving. So taking a look to see what those supports, and again, coming from the States, coming from Canada, the supports obviously look different. So I can't necessarily recommend go see your social worker, or, you know, I went to Walmart because a kid's socks were in the mud the other day, so I went and bought socks. So wherever you need to tap into those supports. But I think everyone kind of has the same sentiment here. Start with that emotional well-being. Take a look at how you can build your community, incorporate body breaks, start off with a task that everybody can do, or you would like everybody to do, such as journaling and some basic movement, and then roll into more specific strategies for those who are really, really struggling. I encourage an ABC chart, taking a look at that antecedent, which is that snapshot right before the behavior occurs. It might give a picture, and if you do have another person in the class, that might be a good task to give them. But I know, sorry, I'm rambling.
Awesome. No, that's
No,
great. Thanks for
Yeah,
raising your
thank
hand. So
you.
I had a question for you, Lisa. Do you want to stick around? We have about 25 more minutes. Do you want to go back and kind of the view only? Some people like to jump in and out. What would you like to do?
I'm okay here. I teach hybrid, so I'm used to this.
Okay.
Whatever this is.
So
all this.
Emily, as you hear
Can I pop
all
in,
of this,
Matt?
yeah.
Sorry. So Lisa had me
sorry. Hop
thinking,
in.
Emily, sometimes things that you can do is you can also sneak in like sneaky movement breaks. So like maybe they're like if you decided to do this journaling thing, or maybe it's strips of paper and they're in different places in the classroom. And so students have to get up from their desk to get the thing that they need to get. And you're instantly like filling in some movement and transition and things without like a formal movement break too. That could be something that you could build into your like when they come in, you know, you could leave them in different spots, or you could have different things. Just a thought. Like sometimes when I'm planning my lessons, I intentionally don't tell the kids to get all their stuff out at the beginning. And it seems like I'm wasting time, but I'm really not. I want them to go to the back of the room to get the books halfway through my lesson, because that means they have to get up and move around. So there's other ways you can add in, besides like a go noodle or a brain break or breathing, which are all awesome. There are other sneaky ways teachers can build in movement breaks that are not, they may seem like they're just accidental, but they're really intentional. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I think that's one of the things I've missed about having a traditional looking classroom with like the reading rug and your tables over here, your books over there, the library, everything's so like you're in your little taped off box. But that's a good suggestion of, there's definitely some areas and like some drawers and things that they can keep items. I could be a little bit more creative with that, because I've noticed that like they just are sitting there and everything they need is right inside their cubby. And they don't go anywhere else. And so those like little brain breaks too, where everyone's like, all right, let's all walk to the rug, let's all go back to our desks, are something that's definitely missed in the room. That's a good idea.
So I just wanted to just jump in, Miguel. That was a great point. He talked about, and a lot of us here, or you actually, I'm just kind of listening and taking it in too, talked about bell ringers, how to start a lesson. I just threw in the chat a friend of mine, Carl Hooker, in one of his latest blogs, who was on the podcast one time as well. He just wrote a blog post recently about some great bell ringers. So I threw that in the chat as well. So a question I want to throw out to all of you, because this came up a lot this week in our district with the new educators, and Emily, I'm sure, is either hearing this a lot or will soon. In Massachusetts, the governor and commissioner said we're all coming back, at least elementary, by April 5th, and then set dates moving forward. So one of the big questions that we've had, and I know Ariel, you've had different settings, and Lisa, you were saying you've been hybrid or moving around, and same with Carrie, is as we start to move more kids back, and at some point, maybe back to full capacity in this school year, how are we building that culture within the class? Because that was the one big thing that our teachers, and it took me by surprise, because we have two cohorts, or some are at home and some are here. How do we rebuild that culture, even though we kind of know everybody, but we've never been in the same space? Or maybe you have, like I know Ariel at some point had everybody, but then they're out and then they're in. So that's my big question to the four of you, and kind of just to chat about, how do we build that culture as more kids start coming back into one room? And for us, we took the 6 feet to 3 to 6 feet, which really means 3 feet, to get more kids back. So how are we building that culture with more kids coming in?
So I've been face-to-face since August. I don't have any remote students. And we've had periods of quarantine where we've had certain students in and out, and my whole class was quarantined. But because it's been the 15 of them, the 2 of us, and my classroom aide, same setting every day, we do feel more traditional. We do feel like a regular school year. However, we're in the same room all day. We don't have any transition time because my students are receiving their specials like art and music, with the exception of PE in the classroom and eating lunch in the classroom. So it's a lot of time spent in the same room. So we've been going outside a lot, and we're trying to build that culture through nature and trying to just move our environment a lot. I'm not really sure if this is the question you asked, but I think this will be helpful for everyone as the weather gets where you are. Just moving outside is so much better and so much more helpful for us. And we do a lot of learning outside. We've done a lot of mixed groups. I have a co-teacher, so I'll keep some of the students inside. She'll take some outside, and it's great because it just feels like more of a traditional classroom again, where you're up and moving a little bit. So, Emily, if you have the opportunity to take your kids outside, they love it. It feels like a reward. It's obviously a mask break for them, and it gets them moving a little bit because we realized we had no movement, which was really difficult.
Yeah, and coming from, we've had quite the shakeup in Ontario, in Southern Ontario, where I am. And we've been, again, we started in person, and then it's been virtual, then it's been hybrid. So hybrid is we're teaching online and in person at the exact same time. So that's been a bit challenging. So sometimes I have taken my laptop outside when we go outside for our walks, and we've done remote scavenger hunts or nature walks, and I do carry my device around. But definitely taking a look at their interests. So I'll run spirit days just for the class. So it's so great to be part of a greater school community, but knowing that your classroom is also a community within itself, and taking a look at some of those specific interests. You can create special days just for them around an interest, whether it be Among Us, or for me right now, I'm doing fiction. So on Friday, they're dressing up as their favorite fairy tale. So we're talking about fairy tales this week. And that's just specific for my group, my little cohort. Definitely building in the outside time, lots of movement, and then talking to them, telling them, this is hard. Guys, this is hard. It's not easy for you. It's not easy for us. And your parents are making the best decision with all the information that they have. And it's okay if you don't feel ready to be at school. And it's okay if you feel a little bit nervous, but we're going to do this together, whatever that looks like. So you tell me, what would make you have a successful day today? And truthfully, I don't think a lot of people ask them how they're doing. We move them, we transition them. The adults will take them to school, from school, but have we ever asked them? And some of the behaviors that you mentioned could be because they're not feeling heard. Allow them to be heard. And that is a way you can build the community, especially as you're transitioning back in person.
Awesome. So Carrie, you see a lot of transitions every day because you have kids coming in and out. What would be something you could, and maybe I'm just asking selfishly, for me to pass on to our teachers?
Well, when you started talking, I thought how wise of your teachers to think of that roadblock that they might face. I have most of my students online. There's some variation between period to period. I might have 2 kids that are at home, or 3, depending on whatever new adventure we're on for the week, right? But I think that one of the greatest things that can happen as new changes come into buildings is for admin to give teachers permission to not have to be academically driven, to give them permission to stop the teaching and pay attention to the relationships again. Like I think with every new student funneling in from either a hybrid situation or a remote situation back into our classroom, we have to take that into account, that they're going to need time to transition, and we need to give ourselves permission to maybe pause the teaching, to give them a chance to get used to being back in person, to address whatever needs that they have. And I think that admin front loading that and foreseeing that as an issue, rather than teachers having to experience it and then feeling guilty that they had to stop the teaching when it's really their guts telling them the right thing. I think that could be a really wise way to to go into some of these really big changes, you know, to really go back where we were at the beginning of the year, where we're giving ourselves plenty of permission to go slow and at the kids' pace, to then step into that again and give teachers permission for that again.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. And Emily, is that something that's going to happen in your class, in your school, that they're going to be moving kids back in?
Yes, in my school, but not for my grade level. So third grade is either full in or full remote. And so that having that choice of being fully remote is still an option. I know of 4 students who were fully remote who are coming in person. And unfortunately, like, I'll only be able to take 1 because of the spacing requirements in my room. So 3 of my students will have to go to other third grade teachers. But third grade is not really very affected, but 5th, 6th, and 7th in my school are hybrid. So there will be a huge influx of students having to come in person, but that won't really affect my grade.
So are they talking about some strategies or things that have come up with that? Because that big announcement just came out last week.
Yeah, we actually just did have a staff meeting, but we don't know the numbers yet. There was a survey sent out saying like you need to choose fully remote or fully in person by, I think today, actually by the 14th. So I'm assuming those numbers will come out and we'll have a meeting at some point this week to talk to, especially those teachers who will have big differences, like what they can do and how much it's really going to affect the spacing in their room and who's getting how many more students. So those numbers haven't really come out yet. I assume that they will this week though.
Yeah, and it just seems like it's a constant transition this year, and it's constant moving in and out of different, whatever your environment is, it's constant. And I know, Arrow, you've actually moved at the beginning of the year and moved around a lot. How are we supporting our new educators with this level of transition? And like, what are some of the things that you have done or you have seen that has helped our new educators with this level of transition? Because it could be 3 times a week things are changed, and you know, quarantining or back or all out and all in. And, you know, unfortunately, or actually one of the weeks, and might have been last week, Emily and Molly said they're fortunate because they don't know any different. However, having routines are important. And for new educators to come into this and be like, yes, I get that it's a bonus to fly by the seat of your pants in year 1. However, still having that support in the transition is tough. So what would you say to some of the new educators, this level of transition this early in their career?
Well, I could tell you something my district is doing really well. I don't know how much that will help other educators, but it perhaps might inspire an administrator to do what my district is doing. My district has had a plan for new teacher meetings, and they weren't sure in August what they would look like, if they would be in person or if what they would be like. So they came out with a projected list of topics. They ended up being all remote because, you know, the world didn't really end up the way that we thought that it would be at this point. But the topics have changed a lot and they've really thrown them back to us. Now, I'm in a weird situation because I attend new teacher meetings, but I'm not a new teacher because I'm in a new district. So I really appreciate that we have the ownership of what topics we want. And of course, this is what we want our students to do too. We want our students to have choice and voice. And I really like that the topics are not just these rigid ideas that were presented to us in August. They are shifting and changing as our world is shifting and changing. And we've had a lot of choice through the year of what we want to attend. I'm going back to the middle school next year. So I've been able to attend some middle school professional development, which is better for me in the long run because that's my career and where I will be. And it's really appreciated. So I'm just really grateful that my district has allowed us as new teachers to have ownership of the development and the continued education that we want. And I hope that other districts are following that too, because this is a really weird year. So many of us are in different roles. And I know for me, I'm not hybrid or remote right now. So ed tech is great and it can help me, but I need support for traditional learning in the classroom and building in ed tech in my room, not necessarily for like synchronous learning. I'm not really doing that right now. So I really appreciate options. And I hope that other districts are doing that for new teachers. If you do have new teacher meetings, and if you don't, I hope that that can start. And hopefully these are a good platform to start with and having a place to connect because everyone needs someone to just vent to sometimes and just talk to. And that's why we do this every week. We need some faces of people laughing and smiling and saying, I hear
About it, right?
So thank you, Matt, again, because these are so helpful.
Lisa, you unmuted. Did you want to jump in?
I was just typing, but I'll share here. In Ontario,
Okay.
we have something, it's okay. We have something called the New Teacher Induction Program, and it's an acronym called NTIP. And it's a mandatory training for all new teachers. And it essentially goes through that. It goes through a variety of topics. And it's about every 4 to 6 weeks. So they get to go and leave, or I guess remote meetings at this point, to have PD, and they would have an NTIP leader in the school. So you would have a seasoned educator in the school to join them in their NTIP, and they have to complete for 1 calendar year, and then they would kind of graduate from this NTIP program. And it is a mandatory in Ontario, which is really neat. And I appreciated that. I was a new teacher, God, 11 years ago. I'm aging myself here. But it was a great way to connect with other educators as well as seasoned educators to kind of gain some more knowledge in just different areas. And then just, I think this year, again, being so unique, I think all educators really need to be open with sharing resources, because we're being moved around to different grades or different specialties. We really need to open those floodgates and be willing to share those Google Docs and share those digital platforms with one another. These are such safe spaces that I feel many of us have been able to engage in during this time. And I think more educators need to be open. I say sometimes we hoard resources. They're mine and they're, we're not sharing, but we really need to share, especially with our new educators, and we need to make them feel inclusive. It's the only way. If we model that, that's how our classrooms will then be modeled as well, right? An inclusive environment.
Awesome. So Ariel, I'm going to ask you another question just to go off of what you said, because I'm going to put a different lens on it, and you can all educate me, because when you said let the new teachers, or even like you said, veteran teacher who are in a new role, choose your own PD, I like cringe a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, because there's also a PD plan for the year, where my role as the director of digital, curriculum instruction and assessment, I have this plan, and this is what we're going to do. I fully understand that piece of that. So how do I not cringe?
So let me narrow that down. We have a choice of what we can.
Okay. All right. Now I like this. This is now we're building consensus here.
Sorry, I didn't say that. Not taking away your job title at all. And the person who creates our professional development has done a great job for planning a lot of different choices. And I really appreciate that we don't have to necessarily sign up for it in advance. We do have to let them know, a couple of days in advance, but I don't need to commit to what I want to attend in August for March. And I really like that, because my life is changing. My students are changing. Their needs are changing. So recently I just attended a professional development on Pear Deck. And I really was trying to not go to so many ed tech professional developments, because I don't want to say I don't need them. It's just I'm in person. But I figured my students have Chromebooks. We're a one-to-one district. Let me learn something new. And that's not something I do often. That's not typically what I would choose from the choice board. So I really like that every month when we meet, I choose what I'm in the mood for. And I hope that makes you feel better as the person who's planning it. It's not taking away your job, but I do like, though, that my district appreciates the feedback, and they really value what we have to say and what our needs are and what the needs of the community are. And if someone has an idea, they really appreciate hearing it from us. I feel very lucky.
No, I think that's awesome. And I wasn't worried about taking my job away or title. It was that sometimes, and I think that was a great answer of like narrowing the choices of what we're doing. Sometimes when I think in the role of saying, here's a district-wide idea, and then some teachers are like, but I really want to do these few things that really don't match our district improvement plan. So having those choice boards and doing that's awesome. And I know, Carrie, you were like shaking your head immediately when I started talking about that. I'd love to hear what you were thinking.
Well, no, I was just thinking, like, it's wonderful when it's just like teaching, right? It's wonderful when we want to give kids choice, but like infinite choices is just like, we can't possibly do that. So that's why I was laughing when you were responding to her. I was like thinking like that, but having a few options is always good. And I do like the idea of not having to sign up until, later on in the school year. That's a good idea.
And when I say we, I probably should have been more specific. Options.
The smorgasbord of PD that's happening in
Yeah, it's not like a
areas.
tremendous, like, like Brady Bunch choice board. We have like 3 to choose from. And I really appreciate it because too many choices becomes very overwhelming as well.
Awesome. So Emily, I'm going to ask you, you get to be the new teacher voice now. If you were to have a choice board, because I really like where this is going and it feels a little ed camp style and breaking up staff meetings or PD day, what would be some of the biggest or largest needs you have? And maybe in the last 5 minutes, we could maybe even jump on one.
Okay, that's a great question. I might need to think for a moment about what I feel like I need most, but I mean, I just teach reading and writing, and I think that remotely I'm
going to stop you for a second.
Yeah, you don't just teach reading. And
take it away, Carrie.
Emily,
okay,
sorry.
I don't teach math though.
But it doesn't matter.
Okay.
You knew what I was going to say, right, Carrie? As soon as,
well, that's like me and Lisa saying we just teach special ed.
Right. So that's their mentor.
I just put a mentor roundtable on Sunday.
Yeah. That's your big tip of the night. Never put in front of whatever you're doing and whatever role you're in education. So back to you now.
Currently, I am specializing in teaching reading and
writing.
There
it is.
Thank you. And I think one of my biggest struggle areas is on Zoom, teaching writing. I'm having such a hard time with that. And I think that if there was some sort of professional development, because they're like on Word documents, they're not handwriting sentences for the most part for me, just because that's how my school, they don't want parents having to email things in. And that's just how we've started from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I think like spelling on there is really hard, and just like finding ways to properly put in writing and spelling and things like that into our plans. I think that's something that I've been struggling with, and I haven't ever taught it before. And so, and I'm not teaching it in person right now either. I'm just teaching writing on Zoom. And I don't know, going to like a writing workshop would be fantastic because I don't know too many strategies. It's just what my mentor teachers and the other 3rd grade teachers are doing in person, but their plans for in person don't always match very well for my remote students. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've never taught writing and no one's ever taught it on Zoom that I'm talking to either. And that's one thing that is the biggest for me currently. But if I think of others, I will definitely mention them.
No, that's a huge piece of it. And Liv is talking in the chat, and she does some amazing work. And done some workshop, and I invited her over, so hopefully he jumps over, but I didn't know if any of you had some quick ideas, but I think this is one similar to last week where we ended on one where we can pick it up next week, and I might throw it out to the Twitter fans out there and see if they can add to it. But real quick, in our last 5 minutes, what would you say for Emily as she goes into this week?
I think I would probably give you a lot more credit than I think that you're giving yourself right now. I think the fact that you're here asking questions and seeking support is already leaps and bounds ahead of many. Not that it's a competition, but I'm saying that you are actively seeking, and it already shows and demonstrates your leadership skills. So your students, your district, your school is very blessed to have you as an educator, that you're constantly learning and growing. So many already have lots to learn from you. So don't forget that. Also, the second thing is, don't forget that kids at home can still do hands-on tasks. So they may have loose parts at home that you could build into some writing if they needed some help in that way. So take a look at what in a dream world, what you would love to do in person, and see how you could encourage them or suggest how they could replicate at home, at least for practice. Assessment might be a little bit tricky, but at least for some practice, maybe building in some hands-on tasks with a few options, and you can provide them a choice board.
I like that. Hey, Liv, thanks for jumping on. Yeah, I know you had something going on early, but always seem to jump on. It's awesome. And this happened to be in your wheelhouse, so you came in right on time. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'd love to hear what your first suggestion was when Emily brought this up.
Well, Emily, are you using anything like Google Docs or Office 365?
Yes, we use Office 365. We work through Microsoft Teams.
Awesome, we do too. And currently, are you having students do writing through Word, and you're doing comments and things like that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have like a writing rubric that you use?
Kind of. So right now we're starting, we just started a new unit of paragraph responding. And so it's structured. We have it like in a table on PowerPoint right now. Actually, it's like topic, sentence, detail, 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 conclusion to kind of structure it. And then eventually we give them a blank document. But that's where we're at. And we did same for opinion writing and things like that.
Awesome. So one of the things that I like to use are single point rubrics. We're standards based grading here. And so when I put it in that framework for them, I actually copy and paste it into their document once they have it. And then I highlight the things that they are when they're meeting the learning outcomes. And then the stretch areas I put on the left-hand side column, and then the kind of like the glow areas I put on the right-hand side column. So there's 3 columns. And I find that that really is helpful because once they reach so when I conference with them, I always say, we always share what their strengths are, because I feel like kids need to know what their strengths are so they keep on doing it, right, as they move forward. And then depending on what it is that they're working on, I always say, okay, here's an area of opportunity. Go back and make the changes so that we can move you out of that left-hand column into the, where they are meeting expectations and whatnot. And most of my kids will take that area of opportunity because they want to grow and they feel so good about themselves when they do. Sometimes if they've already reached their today's best, then they stop, and that's okay. We know that that's what they're still working on as they move forward. And then one of the things that I always say to my students before they finish writing, before they come to me for conferencing, is they have to read it over 3 times. And so I have this acronym. It's DYRIO, DYRIO, and it stands for Did You Read It Over? And so I tell them the first time you read it over, you're reading it like a reader, as if somebody else is reading your writing. So you're looking for things like, does it make sense? Is my message clear? Looking for organization, things like that. And then the second time you're reading it over, you've taken off that reader hat. You've put on I call it a revision expert. So you are reading it, looking for ways to make your writing better. So it's finding, another way to say said, or another, adding in adjectives, or adding in, said with her head hung low, or, things like that, right? Just so that it's always like pushing yourself, because writing is never ever finished. So I always push them, okay, what are you going to do to make your writing even better? And then the third time they read it over, now you've taken off that revision expert hat, and then you've put on your editor hat. So now I'm looking for periods, capitals, grammar, spelling, those kinds of things. And then, so when they come to me, then first question is, did you read it over? How many times? When often they'll I don't know, I think they want to cheat, but until I ask them, then they're like, okay, they turn around, they leave and come back. Then the second question I ask at them is, what did you make better in your writing? And my kids are face to face, but we were remote before, when we went to emergency remote teaching learning. And so what they would do is, I can actually see that they've made changes, because they've, in paper form, they've had little tiny writing, or they've added an arrow or an asterisk, or, so they've actually made it better. And then we go into, reading it through and focusing on what it is that they are really working towards. And again, it's and sometimes I'll just say right from the start, okay, what are your strengths in writing? And beginning of the year, so many kids don't even know what their strengths are. And, I had this happen with my son. He came home one day, got a 7 out of 10. I said, well, why'd you get 7 out of 10? He said, I don't know. The next week he wrote another paragraph. He got 10 out of 10. I said, well, why'd you get 10 out of 10? I don't know. I said, well, what are your strengths in writing? He said, I don't know. So he had no idea what he was doing well or how he can improve each time. So that really kind of made me feel like kids always have to know what their strengths are. So now when you ask my kids, they'll tell you, well, I always write an opening sentence. I always write a, closing sentence. I have great organization in my writing. They'll tell you, I always add, if it's personal writing, I always add thoughts and feelings in my writing that help, share the story of whatever their personal experience is. they'll say, I use powerful words, and they'll point out, these words that, like when kids use more interesting words, I always put a little heart there, because it's like, oh, that's a great choice word. You've changed it from one kind of simple word to a more elaborate or emphatic word. And so this is just like one of the things that I do with the kids. But
Did you just say that's one of the things? You just gave Emily a 3-credit course. What do you mean? That's one of the things that was fabulous.
This is an amazing thing.
Yeah, that was fabulous.
Yes, thank
And
you
I saw,
so much.
thank you so much. But before we close out, I saw Carrie unmute before I brought Liv over. I didn't know if you wanted to add something. I didn't want to feel like you got cut off.
No. I
Okay.
would probably add to Liv's things. And I love the idea, Emily, that you were saying about having the chart in like a PowerPoint. But what makes me think is like, where do you want to take your kids beyond PowerPoint? So maybe that chart becomes part of their Word doc. And I love to use those kind of charts in Word docs, because that's like their brainstorming, that's their scaffolding, right? And then they can copy and paste from the chart down below. And then I love Liv's idea. I like to name it different processes, right? So then they edit, and I like to embed or make sure the students have a live copy of an editing checklist. So I like to be really intentional in case kids miss it. Like, this is exactly what a really good editor does before they turn in anything to get, and I call it revising, when they revise with me, because I feel like there's just 2 different steps to things. So having some kind of editing checklist that takes everything into account that you want them to do. And I even love to use like color coding for things, like highlight the topic sentence yellow, highlight the conclusion sentence blue, because then they have to intentionally go in and recognize that things are there. And if it's not there, then we're not ready to revise. And so maybe I like to take a template doc and build in my entire process of writing from top to finish, even embed the rubric in the doc. And then I just reuse that doc over and over again with different topics on it. And then I know all my tools are in there. And I'm also know I'm creating a really good writing process in the students that are engaging in the tasks on the doc, if that helps.
These are great suggestions.
So Emily on the fly throws out an idea for her choice board, and we just went 15 minutes. Awesome. And I think it's one to continue for next week, because that was such a robust topic at 10 minutes to 7 minutes before we finished.
That was pretty large, just not a specific question at all.
Yeah, so that was, it was perfect. And that's what the space is for, and to bring in some educators who've done it. And Liv, of course, as always, thanks for sharing. And Lisa, thanks for jumping on. I think both you and Liv are from Canada, so that's awesome. We get north of the border experience. And just want to thank all of you for continuing to support the work of our new educators and all of our educators. And I'm going to be sharing this out both on our podcast and the video playback, because so many people have been really chiming in through the week where they can't make 8:30 on Sundays, but they've liked some of the things that we've been chatting about. So I just want to thank all of you. Thanks for 2 special guests jumping on today. And of course, Carrie, Emily, and Ariel, always great to connect with you on Sundays. And I hope you all have an awesome week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, see you later. All right, Ariel, you've been going for a while now, huh?